Night settles over Guthrie in Oklahoma territory. The streets are quiet, but the quiet feels tense, like the town is holding its breath. A lantern swings outside the jail, and its light slides across iron bars and stone walls. Inside, men lie awake on hard bunks. Some are thieves, some are fighters, some are simply unlucky. They do not know it yet, but this will be the night their names leave the jail and enter frontier legend. A guard walks the hallway with tired eyes. He expects the same shift as always. A few curses, a few rattled chains, then morning. He does not expect footsteps behind him. A shadow appears where no one should be. It moves with calm purpose. The guard turns, and a man steps into the lantern glow. Dark coat, hat pulled low. Face set like stone, a pistol rises. The man's hand is steady. His voice is low and certain. Open the locks, he says, or die. For a heartbeat, the guard cannot breathe. This is not a drunk looking for trouble. This is a man who has lived by one hard rule. Act first or get buried. Keys clink, metal scrapes, a lock turns, and the jail changes. It stops being a cage and becomes a doorway. Cell doors swing open. Boots hit the floor. Men rush into the corridor, grabbing coats, hats, anything that makes them look like ordinary travelers instead of prisoners. Some snatch weapons, some grab only nerve. They move fast, because time is the real enemy. 14 prisoners spill into the night. Minutes later, the guard's shout finally breaks loose. An alarm bell clangs, doors slam, boots pound across wooden steps. A sleepy town snaps awake, and panic spreads like fire through dry grass. Mothers pull children back from windows. Men rush outside in shirt sleeves, trying to see what is happening. In the stable yards, horses whinny as saddles are thrown on. Farther out, on the edge of town, a train whistle moans, and the sound feels like a warning. The chase has already started by sunrise. Guthrie will be furious and embarrassed. The sheriff will stare at empty cells. Deputies will saddle horses and swear they will bring everyone back. And the town will understand one truth. This was not luck. Someone planned it. Someone led it. That someone is Bill Doolin. His name travels faster than hoofbeats. It rides the telegraph wires and newspaper ink. It passes from saloons to general stores, from ranch camps to train depots. Some speak it with excitement, as if it is a show. Others speak it with fear, because fear is honest. Bill Doolin is not the loudest outlaw. He is not the wildest. He is something more dangerous. He is careful. He watches before he acts. He listens more than he talks. He remembers roads, rivers, and the small mistakes that get men caught. In a land where law is thin and distance is wide, that kind of mind can keep a man alive. People will call his crew the Wild Bunch. Others will call it the Doolin-Dalton Gang. Either way, the pattern is the same. A bank is hit, a train is stopped, and the outlaws vanish into open country like smoke. Bill Doolin becomes the face that keeps escaping. But legends do not begin as legends. Bill Doolin starts as a boy born in 1858 in Arkansas. He grows up in a world where work comes before comfort. When he is old enough, he heads west and finds a job as a cowboy in Indian Territory. Long days, rough weather, low pay, a hard life, but a clean one. Men who knew him early described him as quiet. Some even called him honest. That detail matters, because it raises the question that hangs over his whole story. What turns a working cowboy into the man standing in a jailhouse hallway, offering a guard two choices, keys or death? The frontier is full of answers. It is a place where pride starts fights, where fear ends them, and where a single mistake can follow a man like a shadow. Once the law starts hunting, the world shrinks. Every town has eyes. Every stranger might be a deputy. Every knock might be the end. Under that pressure, men make choices they would never make in daylight. Bill Doolin makes his. The story ahead will bring gunfire, robberies, and a hunt that never lets up. It will lead to the Battle of Ingalls, where a small town turns into a battlefield. It will lead to capture, escape, and a final ambush near Lawson. But this first scene the jailbreak shows the shape of his life. He is a man who keeps moving because stopping feels like surrender. He is hunted, but he is also chasing something of his own. Control. In the West, control is rare. An outlaw steals it for minutes at a time, then spends weeks paying the price. That is the trap, because every escape makes him feel untouchable. And every escape makes the law more determined to touch him. Somewhere out in the darkness, 14 fugitives run. Behind them, the territory wakes up. Ahead of them, the road stretches long and unforgiving. Bill Doolin rides into that night like a man who thinks he can outrun fate. But fate is already riding too, long before the jailbreak in Guthrie, long before newspapers printed his name in bold letters. Bill Doolin was just another young man trying to live. He was born in 1858 in a poor part of Arkansas. The world he entered did not promise comfort. It promised work. Boys learned early that food came from effort, not from luck. The days were long. The summers were hot. The winters were sharp. And in homes like his, there was no room for big dreams. There was only the next chore, the next meal, the next season. As he grew older, Bill learned to keep his emotions quiet. He was not the kind of person who filled a room with his voice. He watched more than he spoke. He listened before he decided. People remembered him as steady, not flashy, the kind of man you might trust to hold a rope line in a storm. But Arkansas was not where his story would grow. The West was calling two young men all over America. It was not only a place on a map, it was an idea. A place where a person could leave mistakes behind and start over. A place where a man could become something new. In his early 20s, Bill drifted west. He did not ride out like a hero from a storybook. He traveled the way many did, moving from job to job, town to town, sleeping rough when he had to, and saving money when he could. He carried what mattered. He left the rest. He found work as a cowboy in Indian Territory. The land was wide and open, but it was not peaceful. It was a land of hard edges, cattle trails, small towns, rough camps, long rides under big skies. And in many places, the law felt far away. Cowboy work looked free from a distance, but it was not easy. He woke before sunrise. He rode for hours. Dust covered his clothes and stuck to his skin. Rain soaked him when the weather turned, and he had no dry place to hide. Some nights he slept beside a fire. Some nights he slept in the saddle. He learned to read the moods of animals and men. He learned that a calm face could prevent a fight. He also learned something else. In a place where the law was thin, a man's reputation became his shield. If people thought a man was weak, they tested him. If they thought he was dangerous, they stepped around him. On the frontier, fear traveled fast, faster than the truth. At first, Bill did not chase trouble. He worked, he followed orders, he tried to build a simple life, but the West was full of temptation, and it came in the shape of other men. In ranch camps and small towns, Bill met drifters who spoke in quiet voices about easy money. They talked about trains that carried cash. They talked about banks that locked gold behind thin walls. They talked about the world like it was a game, and the only rule was to take what you could. Most working men heard that talk and laughed. They had families. They had plans. They did not want a rope around their neck. But some men listened. And sometimes, even a decent man listened when life felt unfair. Bill's life as a cowboy was honest work, but it did not always pay enough. A season could turn bad. A ranch could close. A boss could cheat a man out of wages. A sickness could take a horse. One problem could push a man into debt. and debt could push a man into desperate thoughts. Still, Bill did not become an outlaw overnight. It was slower than that. It was like walking toward a cliff in fog. Each step felt small. Each step felt safe. Until suddenly the ground was gone. He began spending time around people who had rough friends. Men who carried guns as if guns were part of their clothing. Men who asked strange questions, like, how many guards ride that train? Or which road does the sheriff take at night? Men who always seemed to have money right after they claimed they had none. Bill told himself he was only listening, only watching, only learning the world. But the West has a way of pulling men into its currents. A man might start by staying close to danger, thinking he can step away any time. Then one day, he is part of it. Another thing changed Bill's world. Pride. In a frontier town, pride could be as deadly as a bullet. A small insult could grow into a gunfight by sundown. A man who felt disrespected might do something foolish, just to prove he could. People were watching all the time. And in the West, being laughed at felt worse than being broke. Bill was not a loud man, but he was still a man. And like all men, he had a line that could be crossed. The story of that line, the moment that could not be undone, is where part 3 begins. Because soon, Bill will be pulled into a celebration that turns into chaos. The kind of chaos that brings lawmen running. The kind that leaves people bleeding. The kind that forces a man to choose between surrender and flight. And once a man chooses flight, life changes fast. For now, Bill Doolin still looks like a cowboy. He still rides the range. He still blends in with working men. He still has moments where he could turn back. But the West is already closing around him. And somewhere deep inside him, something is waking up. Not evil, not madness, a cold, practical thought. If the world is unfair, then maybe he has the right to be unfair too. That thought is small at first, quiet, easy to ignore, but in the next chapter will grow loud enough to change his name forever. Bill Doolin did not wake up one morning and decide to become an outlaw. It did not happen like a switch turning on. It happened like a slow storm building on the horizon, where the sky looks normal until the first thunder cracks. By the summer of 1891, Bill was living the kind of life many young men lived in the West. He worked hard. He moved where the work was. He spent nights in small towns that smelled like dust, sweat, and horses. He kept his head down and his eyes open. But in a frontier town, the line between a working man and a wanted man could be very thin. Sometimes, it only took one bad night. That night came on the 4th of July. Coffeyville, Kansas, was full of noise and motion. Flags hung from buildings. Children ran through the streets. Men laughed loudly. Fireworks popped in the distance like small gunshots. The whole town felt like it was celebrating the idea of freedom. Bill was there with other men, and they were drinking. It was not unusual. In towns like that, a celebration meant whiskey, beer, and stories that grew bigger with every bottle. But Kansas had rules. And those rules did not care about holidays. A local officer came to stop the drinking, to take the liquor, to shut it down. On paper, it was simple. A lawman doing his duty, a few men told to go home. In real life, it was not simple at all. Because when men are drinking, their pride becomes loud. And when pride becomes loud, it does not listen to reason. Someone talked back. Someone took offense. Someone felt embarrassed in front of the crowd. Then the moment broke. A fight started, not a clean fight. Not fists and apologies. A messy fight full of shouting and pushing. The kind of fight where people forget they can walk away, and then a gun came out, and the sound of the first shot changed everything. The celebration stopped being a celebration. It became a threat. People screamed and scattered. The air smelled like powder. A lawman fell or stumbled. Another was hit. The street that had been full of laughter turned into a place where everyone was trying to survive the next second. No one remembers chaos the same way. Some people later claimed Bill fired. Others claimed he did not. In a moment like that, truth gets lost in panic. But one thing is certain. The law did not see it as a misunderstanding. The law saw it as an attack, and once the law sees you that way, it does not matter what you meant. It matters what you did. It matters what people believe you did. It matters what they can prove and what they can shout loud enough to convince others. After that night, Bill understood something that many men learned too late. A bad moment can take your whole life. Because now there were wounded officers. Now there were angry citizens. Now there were men riding out of town to hunt for names and faces. And Bill had a choice. He could stay and face whatever came next, or he could run. Running sounds simple when people say it, but running is a decision that leaves a mark. The first time a man runs from the law, he often tells himself it is temporary. He tells himself he will clear it up later. He tells himself he will go somewhere quiet, wait, and then come back when things calm down. But the West was not the kind of place where things calmed down. Once a man ran, rumors chased him faster than horses. A small story became a big one. A wounded officer became a murdered officer in a stranger's mouth. A man who was simply present became the man who started it. And the more the story grew, the harder it became to return. Bill rode away into that truth. Each mile put distance between him and the town, but it also put distance between him and the life he had before. A cowboy could blend in. A wanted man could not. A cowboy could ride into a town and buy coffee. A wanted man had to watch every face in every doorway. When Bill ran, he did not just run from that night. He ran toward a new life. A life where survival came first. And survival has a cost. A man on the run needs food, a horse, and a place to sleep. A man on the run needs ammunition. A man on the run needs money. A normal working job does not help a man who must stay hidden. A paycheck requires a name. It requires a boss who knows where you are. It requires showing up day after day. A wanted man cannot live that way. So the next question becomes dangerous. If he cannot earn money openly, how does he get it? This is where bad influences matter. This is where the men who told stories about easy money become very real. When a man is cornered, he looks for doors. And some doors are dark. Bill began spending more time with men who lived outside the rules. Men who did not fear the law because they had already decided they would never live under it. Men who understood how to hide in the territory, how to move across borders, how to disappear into open land. These men offered something Bill did not have anymore. A plan. And plans, even violent ones, can feel like hope when a man is desperate. At first, the idea of robbery might have seemed like a last resort. Something other men did, something Bill did not have to do. But the West has a way of making last resorts feel normal. When you are hungry, the question is not, is this right? The question becomes, will this keep me alive? Bill was not a man who enjoyed chaos. He was not reckless by nature. That is what made him dangerous later. He could stay calm while other men lost control. He could think while others reacted. And now, with the law hunting him, that calm mind began to point in one direction. If he wanted to survive, he needed power in the West. Power often came from a gun and the willingness to use it. That 4th of July did not just change Bill's reputation. It changed the way he saw the world. It taught him that the world could turn on a man in a single night. And once it did, kindness would not save him. Only speed would. Only secrecy would. Only strength would. So, Bill Doolin rode deeper into a life where every day was a risk. He crossed into rougher country. He leaned on rougher friends. He became harder, quieter, more watchful, and without realizing it, he stepped onto the road that led straight to the most feared outlaw circle of his time. Because the next chapter is where Bill's story collides with a name that already carried blood and fame across the frontier. The Daltons. And when Bill Doolin meets that shadow, he will not come out the same. Bill Doolin had crossed an invisible line. After the trouble in Coffeeville, he was no longer just a cowboy drifting from job to job. He was a man with a problem that followed him like a second shadow. He could still ride like a cowboy, he could still speak like a working man, but now, every time he entered a town, his eyes searched for badges. Every time a door opened behind him, his muscles tightened. He learned to sit where he could see the room. He learned to leave before questions started, and the more he lived that way, the more normal men began to feel far away. That is how the outlaw world finds a man. Not by knocking on his door like a stranger, it finds him by slowly replacing his old life with a new one. In Indian Territory, the land was wide, and people moved often. Cowboys came and went. A new face did not always bring suspicion. That made it easier for a wanted man to survive. But it also made it easier for dangerous men to hide. Bill began spending time around men who were known for trouble. Some had fast, smiled, some had cold eyes. Some talked too freely, like they were testing who might listen. They told stories about the same things again and again. Trains, banks, and money that could change a man's life in one night. At first, Bill listened. Like a man listens to storm talk. He knew the danger, but he also knew the truth about his own situation. He could not go back. In the West, a man without a clean name was a man without a future. And once you start running, you start needing help. You need places to hide. You need people who will not ask questions. Bill did not need a gang yet, but he needed a circle. That is when he moved closer to the Dalton brothers. The Daltons were already becoming known across the region. They had a rough kind of fame, the kind people feared but also could not stop talking about. They were tied to robberies and escapes. Their names were spoken in the same breath as train stops in the dark. The strange part was that, in the beginning, their world did not look like a world of evil. It looked like a world of opportunity. A man stopped caring about rules. The Daltons did not talk like desperate men. They talked like men who believed they could win. They had a way of making robbery sound almost simple. Stop the train, control the passengers, take the money, leave fast. Disappear into the territory where the law could not follow quickly. But robbery is never simple. It is not only force, it is timing, it is planning. It is knowing where to run and who will protect you. Bill had a calm brain. He could remember details. He could notice things other men missed. That made him useful. It also made him valuable. Soon, he was no longer only listening. He was riding with them. The first big robberies were like a hard lesson written in gun smoke. The gang would choose a spot where the train slowed. They would strike at night or in bad weather, when witnesses were frightened and confused. They would move quickly, because speed mattered more than bravado, and Bill learned the true price of that life. One mistake could mean death. A shout could turn into a gunshot. A gunshot could turn into a battle. A battle could turn into a hanging. He also learned something about fear. When you are holding people at gunpoint, fear gives you control. But fear can also create panic, and panic makes people unpredictable. A frightened passenger can become a hero. A frightened guard can fire. Too soon, a frightened outlaw can lose his nerve. Bill watched how the Daltons handled these moments. He watched how they moved, how they spoke, how they chose roads to escape. He watched the way they relied on quick horses, hidden camps, and friendly faces in lonely places. He was not the loudest man in the group. He was the one who stayed steady. That steadiness became his greatest weapon. But there is a reason the Dalton story ends in blood. Success makes men bold. Boldness makes men careless. And carelessness, in the end, always meets the law. The Daltons became hungry for bigger scores. Bigger scores meant bigger risks. More money meant more attention. More attention meant more posses, more deputies. More men with guns riding hard for a name and a reward. Bill could feel it building. He could sense the pressure tightening like a rope. Then came the moment that changed everything. The Dalton brothers decided to attempt something that sounded impossible. Not one bank, not one target. They planned to rob two banks at the same time in Coffeyville, Kansas. It was a daring plan, the kind that feeds a man's ego, the kind that makes an outlaw believe he is smarter than the world. But the world was watching. Coffeyville was not a sleepy camp. It was a real town, a town where people recognized faces, a town where men kept guns behind counters and undercoats, a town where citizens would fight back. On the day the Daltons made their move, the town answered them with bullets, the streets filled with gunfire. Smoke rose, men fell, and the Dalton Gang, for all its planning, collapsed under the weight of its own boldness. Only one of them, Emmett, survived. The rest died in the fight. When the dust settled, outlawed life felt different. Not romantic, not clever, just deadly. Dot and Bill Doolin. He was not there at Coffeyville when the Daltons fell. That small detail would become the turning point of his whole life, because now the Dalton name was broken. But the outlaw world was not. There were still men who wanted fast money. There were still men who knew the territory better than the law. There were still hideouts, stolen horses, and plans whispered in dark places. And there was a gap where a leader used to be. In that gap, men looked around and asked a dangerous question. Who will take control now? Bill Doolin was not the type to stand on a table and make speeches. But leadership does not always look like loud confidence. Sometimes leadership looks like the man who stays calm when everyone else is shaking. Sometimes leadership looks like the man who knows the routes, knows the risks, and does not panic when things go wrong. Bill had learned enough from the Daltons to understand the game. Now, he would play it his way. This is where his name stops being a man connected to outlaws and becomes something else. A name that lawmen will remember. A name newspapers will print. A name towns will fear. After the Daltons fell, the West did not become safer. It only became quieter for a moment, like a room after a fight, when everyone is watching to see who will stand up next. Outlaw life does not end because one gang dies. It only changes shape. There were still trains carrying money. There were still banks with weak locks and slow alarms. There were still lonely roads where a man could vanish into open country. And there were still men who believed they could take what they wanted and ride away clean. But the outlaw world needed one thing. A leader. Not a man who talked big, but a man who could organize, plan, and keep people moving. A man who understood that the most important part of a robbery was not the moment you take the money. It was the moment you escape. Bill Doolin was that kind of man. He had watched how the Daltons worked. He had seen their strengths. He had also seen their weakness. They became too bold. They started believing their own legend. And legend can make a man careless. Bill did not want careless. He wanted control. So he began gathering men, not all at once, and not in a neat line like a parade. He pulled them in one by one, like a fisherman pulling in hooks. Some were hard riders. Some were good shots. Some were simply desperate enough to follow. People would later call them the Wild Bunch. Others would call them the Doolin-Dalton Gang. Either name fit because the group carried Dalton blood in its history, but it moved with Doolin's mind. These were not polite men. They were men with nicknames and rough reputations. Men who laughed at danger and treated the law like a challenge. Some were known as fighters. Some were known as thieves. Some were known for being reckless. And Bill Doolin stood in the middle of them, quieter than most, but clearly in charge. He did not lead by shouting. He led by deciding. He chose targets. He chose routes. He chose when to strike and when to disappear. He understood something simple. The law could be slow, but it never stopped. If you wanted to live, you had to stay one step ahead. The gang began to hit banks and trains across the territory. Their robberies were not always clean. Sometimes a clerk froze. Sometimes a passenger panicked. Sometimes a weapon slipped from a hand at the worst possible time, but the gang had a talent for escape. They would strike fast, then melt into the land. They rode into places where roads were more like suggestions than paths. They used river bottoms, tree lines, and wide open prairie. They had hideouts in rough country where deputies did not like to travel. They moved like men who knew every mile, and every time they escaped, their confidence grew. Soon, the name Bill Doolin became a symbol. In one town, it meant fear. In another, it meant gossip. In another, it meant excitement. Because some people treated outlaws like entertainment. That is the strange truth of the Wild West. A man could steal from you, and people would still tell his story like it was a song, but the law did not see it. That way, the law saw patterns. The law saw bodies. The law saw letters from frightened bankers and railroad agents who demanded protection. And the law began to focus on one thing: stopping Bill Doolin-Dalton, Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory. The U.S. Marshals were the long arm of federal law. They were used to dealing with dangerous men. But Doolin's gang was different. It was fast. It was shifting. It was hard to pin down. That made the Marshals angry. Every time a posse arrived too late, the story grew. Every time a deputy chased the wrong trail, Doolin's reputation grew. And soon, the gang's name started rising above other outlaw names, because it felt like they were winning. But no outlaw truly wins. Not for long, because the more famous you become, the smaller your world gets. A man who is unknown can walk into a town and buy food without being noticed. A man who is famous must avoid town completely or risk being recognized by a single sharp-eyed person. Bill understood that. That is why he needed safe places, not just hideouts in the hills, not just camps in the trees. He needed places where the gang could rest, drink, and plan. Places where they could find friends, buy supplies, and hear news about the law. And that is where the story turns toward one small town that will become a name, carved into frontier history. Ingalls was not a large place. It was a few buildings and a few streets, a saloon, a store, a stable. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were noticed, but it also sat in a region where outlaws could disappear quickly into rough country. For Doolin's gang and gals became a kind of breathing space. They could ride in, blend in for a while, and then ride out again. They could sit in a saloon and hear rumors. They could look like ordinary men for a few hours. That comfort, however, creates danger. Because if a gang starts using the same place again and again, the law starts noticing. A pattern forms, and patterns are what lawmen hunt. Deputies began to hear that Ingalls was a safe town for Doolin's men. Maybe it was true, maybe it was only talk, but talk is enough. Law does not always need certainty. It needs a reason to ride. The Marshals began to prepare. They studied movements. They asked questions. They watched the roads. They listened to informants. And when they believed they had the chance, they decided to strike. Meanwhile, Bill Doolin did not see himself as a doomed man. He saw himself as a man managing risk. He had survived trouble before. He had escaped before. He believed he could always find a way out. And for a while, it seemed like he was right. The wild bunch kept moving. The money came in, the gangs. Confidence turned into a kind of swagger. They were not just criminals now. They were an outlaw brand. But the West does not allow a man to build that kind of reputation without a bill coming due. And Ingalls was the place where the bill would arrive. Ingalls, Oklahoma Territory, looks small on a map. It is the kind of town people pass without thinking. A few buildings, a dusty street, a place where the wind always seems to carry grit into the eyes. But on one late summer day in 1893, Ingalls becomes something else. It becomes a trap. Bill Doolin and several members of his gang ride into town like they belonged there. They are not wearing masks. They are not hiding in the open. They move with the calm confidence of men who have done this many times. They tie their horses, step inside, and settle into the only kind of peace outlaws can afford. A short peace. Inside the saloon, the air is thick with smoke and heat. Glass clinks. Cards slap against the table. A piano in the corner plays a simple tune, not because anyone is happy, but because silence makes people nervous. Doolin sits like a man who is thinking even when he looks relaxed. He watches the door. He watches the windows. He watches the faces. He has learned that trouble does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wearing a badge, outside. Town, that trouble is already moving. A posse of deputy marshals rides toward Ingalls with one clear purpose: to arrest Bill Doolin and break the Wild Bunch. They are not boys chasing adventure. They are lawmen who have seen gunfire up close. They know these outlaws will not surrender easily. They also know that if they leave this gang alone, more trains will be stopped, more banks will be robbed, and more families will live in fear. The deputies come in with tight faces and steady hands. They move in a way that shows they expect bullets. They do not ride in a loose group. They ride with space, with angles, with caution. Their horses slow as they reach town, and the street seems to hold still. Ingalls is quiet for a moment, then the deputies split up. Some head toward the saloon. Others position themselves where they can block escape routes. The plan is simple: surprise, surround, and take the outlaws alive if possible. But the problem with plans is this: the other side has eyes too. Someone inside the saloon notices movement outside. Someone sees a horse standing in the wrong place. Someone sees a man who does not look like a ranch hand. A chair scrapes. A voice lowers. A hand moves near a holster. Bill Doolin's head turns slightly. Like a wolf hearing a twig snap. He does not panic. He does something more dangerous than panic. He decides. The deputies step forward and call for surrender. They expect shouting. They expect bargaining. They expect a pause. Instead, the answer comes fast. Gunfire cracks through the air. The first shot hits like a hammer. The next shots follow so quickly they sound almost like one long tearing sound. Windows burst. People scream. Horses jerk and rear. A town that was barely awake a minute ago becomes a storm of smoke and fear. Inside the saloon, the outlaws push. Toward cover. Tables tip. Bottles shatter. The piano stops mid-note. The air fills with sharp powder and shouted names dot outside. The deputies return fire. They crouch behind posts, wagons, corners of buildings. They aim carefully because every bullet matters. The outlaws are not far away, and a man can die in one step. Shots hit wood and kick up dust. Splinters fly like angry insects. A mirror inside the saloon explodes into glittering pieces. Somewhere, a woman cries out and ducks behind a wall. A child is pulled backward by a panicked hand. Bill Doolin moves with quick control. He is not spraying bullets in blind rage. He fires when he sees a target. He shifts positions. He watches for openings. He calls short commands to his men. This is not a robbery. This is a battle. One deputy goes down in the street. Another is hit and stumbles, trying to stay upright through pure will. A third moves to help and is forced back by heavy fire. The deputies realize something brutal. The outlaws are dug in, and they will fight hard. For a moment, the fight becomes a frozen struggle. The outlaws are pinned, but the lawmen cannot rush the saloon without being cut apart. The saloon, meant for whiskey and talk, becomes a fortress. Then a deputy makes a desperate choice. He pulls out dynamite. The bundle looks small, but everyone knows what it can do. The fuse sparks, and the deputies throw it toward the outlaw's position. For a heartbeat, the whole world seems to pause. Then it detonates. The explosion shakes the street. Smoke bursts outward. Glass rains down. A loud shock rolls through town. Like thunder, The blast does not end the fight, but it changes it. Men flinch. Men blink through dust. For a second, the outlaws lose the clear rhythm of their firing. That second is precious. One outlaw is captured in the confusion, but the others use the moment differently. They flee. They burst out of town, running to where their horses are tied, or stealing mounts if they have to. Boots pound the ground, spurs bite, saddles creak as men swing up and kick hard. The deputies try to stop them, but it is already happening. The outlaws ride out like a knot of fast-moving shadows, cutting through dust and sunlight. Bill Doolin rides with them, his mind working even as bullets snap behind him. He does not stop to look back like a man showing off. He looks back like a man measuring distance, counting seconds, and choosing the safest line of escape. Outside town, the outlaws pause on higher ground and fire back, not to win, but to buy time. Every second matters. Every second turns the deputies into smaller targets, farther away, less able to hit. Then the outlaws vanish into the open country. When the gunfire finally fades, Ingalls is left with the aftermath. The street is torn up, windows are broken, people step out slowly, trembling, and wide-eyed. They look at the damaged buildings and the blood on the ground, and they realize something that cannot be forgotten. This was not a story in a newspaper. This was real. Deputies are dead or badly wounded. The town has lost its innocence, and the law has suffered a public wound that it will not ignore. That is the true meaning of Ingalls. It is not only a gunfight, it is a turning point, because after Ingalls, the hunt becomes personal. The Marshals will stop seeing Bill Doolin as just another outlaw. They will see him as a man who kills lawmen and escapes again, a man who must be stopped. Not later, but soon. And Bill Doolin, riding into the wilderness with dust on his face and gun smoke in his lungs, understands the other truth. Every escape narrows the road ahead. Every victory brings stronger enemies. Every mile of freedom has a price. And the West always collects dot after the Battle of Ingalls. Bill Doolin's world becomes smaller, even though he is riding across wide open land. That is the strange part of being hunted. The prairie is huge, but the safe places are few. Every town has eyes. Every ranch has gossip. Every telegraph office can carry noops faster than a horse. And now, the noops is simple. Bill Doolin has crossed a line. Before Ingalls, some people spoke of him like a dangerous rumor. After Ingalls, people speak of him like a storm that has already hit their home. Deputy marshals are dead or wounded. A town has been turned into a battlefield. The law is embarrassed, angry, and determined. So Bill Doolin does what hunted men always do. He keeps moving. He rides the back routes, the ones most people do not know. He avoids main roads. He crosses rivers where the water hides tracks. He sleeps in rough places where a campfire is too risky, and even smoke could be a signal. He learns to eat quickly, to rest lightly, and to wake at the smallest sound. His gang continues robbing, but the robberies feel different now. They are not only about money, they are about survival. A man on the run cannot live without cash. He cannot buy food without risking his face being recognized. He cannot stay in one place without giving the law time to organize, so the gang strikes. Again and again. They hit banks in small towns. They stop trains in lonely stretches where help will arrive late. Each job is fast. Each escape is planned. Each mile is ridden with urgency. But the truth is, the law is learning too. After Ingalls, the Marshals adjust their methods. They begin to study the gang like a problem that must be solved. They listen harder. They pay informants. They track patterns. They look for friends and family, because friends and family are the soft spots in any outlaw's armor. And that is where the cost of running becomes sharp, because Bill Doolin is not only an outlaw leader, he is still a man. And like any man, he wants something simple: a home, a family, a seaway. a place where he can sit down without scanning the room for danger. Somewhere in the middle of his violent life, Bill does something that surprises many people. He marries, he takes a wife, and the act seems almost impossible for an outlaw. How can a man live as a husband when he is never safe? How can a man promise love and stability when he cannot promise he will be alive next month? But men do not stop being human because they become criminals. They still crave normal moments. They still crave a warm meal, a quiet voice, a hand to hold in the dark. For Bill, that marriage becomes both comfort and weakness. Comfort, because it reminds him he is more than a gun. Weakness, because love creates a trail. A man might disappear alone. But a man who returns to the same person again and again becomes predictable, and predictability is what lawmen live for. Bill Doolin begins to feel the pressure in a new way. In the past, the risk was mostly his. Now, the risk reaches the people around him. If the law cannot catch him in open country, they can make life harder for anyone who helps him. They can question, threaten, and watch. The territory becomes a net. Every time he rides, he wonders who is talking. Every time he stops, he wonders who is watching. He begins to trust fewer people. He speaks less. His eyes become sharper. His temper becomes shorter. Not because he enjoys cruelty, but because fear has moved into his bones. And fear changes a man. Some members of the gang handle this pressure badly. They drink too much. They boast in the wrong places. They argue. They make careless moves that draw attention. Bill tries to keep them focused. But he is also fighting another enemy. Time. Every year, the West becomes a little less wild. More towns, more rail lines, more deputies, more telegraph stations. The frontier is shrinking, and outlaws are running out of empty places to hide. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marshals are no longer treating Bill Doolin like a distant problem. They begin assigning their best men to the hunt. Men who are patient and stubborn. Men who do not quit. Men who can ride for days and still think clearly. These lawmen understand something important. Outlaws do not get caught only because they are weak. They get caught because they get tired. Tired men make mistakes. Bill Doolin begins to feel that tiredness. He does not always show it, but it creeps into him. The nights are harder. The hunger lasts longer. The stress never leaves. The gang's victories do not feel like victories anymore. They feel like delays. And that is what outlaw life truly is. A delay, a man delaying the moment the law finally steps, close enough to end it. Bill also begins to feel the weight of what he has done. He has killed, he has threatened, he has stolen. These are not small things. Even if he tries to push them away in his mind, there are families who cannot forget his name. There are widows and children whose lives changed because of gunfire on a dusty street. He cannot undo that, so he rides forward, because forward is the only direction left. But the net keeps tightening. Small rumors reach him, names of deputies who are getting closer, towns where he is being watched, friends who are being questioned. He starts hearing the same names more than once, Tillman, Thomas, and others who will not stop at first. These names are just distant shadows, lawmen far away, chasing trails that might lead nowhere. But then Bill understands something that hits. Like cold water, they are not chasing randomly. They are hunting him, and they are getting better at it. By early 1896, Bill is worn down enough that he makes a dangerous decision. He tries to rest. He goes to a place where he thinks he can hide, recover, and breathe. A place outside the territory, where he believes the heat might be lowered. It is the kind of decision a tired man makes, and tired men are exactly what lawmen wait. For by early 1896, Bill Doolin is tired in a way most people never understand. Not tired like a man after a long day of work, tired like a man who has lived too many nights with one eye open. Tired like a man who has ridden too many miles with danger behind him and danger ahead. Tired like a man who knows the law does not forget. Outlaw life is not only gun smoke and fast horses. It is hunger, it is cold, it is constant suspicion. It is the pressure of knowing that one mistake will not lead to prison, but to a bullet or a rope. After Ingalls, the hunt has not slowed down. It has only become smarter. The Marshals are patient now. They are using informants. They are following patterns. They are learning who helps Doolin, who hides him, who sells him supplies, who passes him messages. And Bill Doolin knows something is changing. He can feel the west tightening, so he makes a decision that looks simple, but is actually dangerous. He tries to recover. He goes east, away from the hottest part of the hunt, to a place known for healing water and rest. A place where sick bodies come to improve and troubled minds come to breathe. A place that does not feel like the territory, Eureka Springs, Arkansas. It is a town built on hills and curves, with wooden buildings, narrow streets, and the smell of mineral springs. People travel there for their lungs, for their bones, for their pain. In a place like that, a man can hide in plain sight if he looks like just another visitor. And Bill does. He does not arrive with a gang at his back. He does not arrive with guns flashing. He arrives like a tired man trying to fix what months of running have broken. He stays quiet. He keeps his face down. He tries to blend into the rhythm of the town. For a short while, it seems to work. Then, the law arrives, not with a large posse, not with loud shouting, not with drama, with one calm, professional deputy marshal. His name is Bill Tillman. Tillman is the kind of lawman who does not chase fame with words. He chases results. He is disciplined, observant, and careful. He understands that a smart outlaw is best caught without giving him a chance to fight. Tillman has been hunting Doolin as part of the larger push to break the Wild Bunch. And now, after months of tracking and waiting, he has the information. He knows where Doolin is. He does not rush in like a hero. He does what a good lawman does. He chooses the right moment. He chooses the right angle. He closes the distance before the target can react. And then, in a place where people are supposed to heal, Bill Doolin is taken. There is no legendary shootout, no long chase through the streets, no dramatic last stand, just a sudden, cold truth. The hunt has caught up. For Doolin, it must feel unreal. A man can survive gunfights. A man can survive open country. But a man can be captured in a quiet moment he thinks he finally has. Cuffs close around his wrists. The weight of them is not only iron, it is finality. Tillman escorts him back toward the territory, back toward Guthrie, where he will be held to face charges. Along the way, people hear the news, and it spreads like wildfire. Bill Doolin is caught. Some cheer. Some shake their heads. Some do not believe it at first. After all, this is the man who always slipped away. The man who vanished into the prairie. The man who made deputies look slow and foolish, but now he is in chains. And that is when something strange happens. When Doolin arrives in Guthrie, the streets fill not with deputies only, but with regular people, farmers, shopkeepers, railroad workers, men who came to stare, boys who came to see what an outlaw looks like up close, women who stand back but still watch, unable to look away. It is not a small crowd. It is a wave of faces. People shout, people laugh, people point, some treat it like a parade, some treat it like a show. To Bill Doolin, it must feel like the West is looking at him as if he is not even a man anymore, but a story that has come to life. That is the frontier's hunger. The same people who fear violence often cannot stop watching it. They want danger at a safe distance. They want to look into the face of the outlaw without being the one staring down the barrel of his gun. And there he is, Bill Doolin, walking under guard, surrounded by noise, fame, and judgment. Tillman delivers him to the jail. The door shuts, the lock turns, and for the first time in a long time, Bill Doolin cannot ride away. If this were a normal story, this would be the end. The outlaw is captured, the law wins. The chapter closes. But Doolin's story is not normal, because the thing that made him dangerous on the outside does not disappear inside. A jailed-out mind is still sharp, his will is still alive, and the jail is full of other men who also hate being caged. That is what most people do not understand about prisons on the frontier. They are not quiet places. They are pressure pots. They are crowded with desperate men, angry men, men who think they have nothing left to lose. And when you place a leader among desperate men, you sometimes create a plan. Bill Doolin begins to watch the patterns of the jail. He notes which guards are careless. He notes which doors are weak. He notes the habits that repeat every day like a clock. He speaks quietly. He listens. He gathers information the way he always has, not by force, by patience. Outside, people believe the danger is over. Newspapers report the capture. Towns feel a little safer. Some deputies allow themselves to breathe for the first time in months, but the best lawmen do not relax. They know one truth. A trapped animal fights hardest, and Bill Doolin is not only trapped, he is famous, he is watched, he is expected to fall, and something inside him refuses, because he has lived too long as a moving man to accept sitting still. So in the dark hours, when guards are tired and the town is asleep, a new idea begins forming behind those bars. Not a dream, not a wish, a plan. Sunday nights in Guthrie felt slow. The town settled early, like a candle burning low. Streets grew quiet. Doors closed. Most people believed the jail was the safest building in town because a jail was supposed to do one job: keep trouble locked away. Inside those walls, the air was heavy. It smelled like sweat, dust, and old stones. Men lay on bunks, staring at the ceiling, listening to small sound chains shifting, a cough in the dark, a guard's boots moving down the hall. Bill Doolin listened too, but he did not listen like a prisoner waiting for morning. He listened like a man measuring the world. He listened for habits, for weakness, for rhythm, because a jail, like anything built by humans, had patterns. Guards walked at certain times. Doors were checked in a certain order. Keys hung on a belt in the same place every night. And when people repeat patterns long enough, they stop seeing danger. Doolin had spent months watching those patterns. He did not need to tell everyone what he was thinking. He spoke quietly, only to the right men in the right moments. He learned who was brave, who was nervous, and who could keep their mouth shut. There were other prisoners in that jail, men who wanted out for their own reasons. Some were petty criminals. Some were hardened. Some were simply scared of what trial might bring, and fear makes men willing to gamble. Doolin understood that, and he used it. The plan was not built on strength alone. It was built on timing and surprise. That night, the guards did what they always did. They walked their rounds. They checked locks. They expected groans, curses, and silence. Then it happened. A small movement, a sudden rush, a man stepping into a guard's path when he should have been behind bars. Hands grabbing, a weapon pressed close. A guard disarmed before his mind fully understood what was happening. The first guard went down in shock. Another guard noticed something wrong and tried to reach the door. Tried to get help, tried to run. But Bill Doolin moved faster. He cut the guard off, slammed the door shut, and locked it from the inside. The guard was trapped, sealed away from the outside world. In that moment, the jail stopped being a place of safety for the law. It became a cage for the guard. The guard's breathing turned sharp and quick. He realized he was surrounded, and he realized the worst thing possible. The prisoners had control. Then Doolin stepped close. In the dim light, Doolin's face looked calm, almost cold, not wild, not shaken. He did not act like a man caught in a desperate moment. He acted like a man completing a job. He raised a pistol and pressed it into the guard's chest. His voice was low and simple. "Open the locks," he said, "or die." The guard's eyes widened. His hands trembled. He knew that in the territory, men died for less than a mistake. He knew Dolin's reputation. He knew the stories about Ingalls. He knew he was not dealing with a man who would hesitate for a second. The guard tried to think of another way. He tried to picture heroism. He tried to picture help arriving. But help was not inside those walls. Only danger was. So he nodded. Small and shaky, keys clinked as he reached for them. Metal scraped. Locks turned. One by one, cell doors opened. The sound was soft, but each click felt like thunder. Men stepped out. Some rushed forward like animals released from a trap. Some moved carefully, afraid this was a trick. Some hesitated, because even criminals can. Since when a choice leads straight to death, Doolin did not beg anyone to come. He did not waste time convincing the unwilling. He focused on what mattered. Speed in the hallway, chaos tried to form, but Doolin's presence kept it controlled. He pointed, he signaled, he pushed the flow forward. The men who followed him moved fast, grabbing coats, vests, hats, anything that could change their appearance. A prisoner who looks like a prisoner is easy to spot. A prisoner who looks like an ordinary man is much harder to catch. Some men found weapons. Others found only courage. Some prisoners were offered freedom and refused it. That detail tells the truth about that night. Even in a jail, some men knew the outside world could be more dangerous than the inside. They understood that an escape was not a victory. It was a chase dot in the end. About 14 prisoners chose the gamble. 14 men stepped into the dark with the law behind them. Outside, Guthrie was sleeping. Inside, the jail was bleeding order. The escapees moved quickly, slipping through doors and into side streets. They did not run as one loud group. They scattered, because scattered men are harder to catch. They moved like shadows, using fences and alleys, avoiding open places. Minutes passed. Then a sound finally broke the night. A shout. Then the alarm. A bell clanged, loud and ugly. Lights flared in windows. Dogs barked. Doors opened. Men stumbled, out half-dressed, pulling on boots and grabbing rifles. Deputies rushed toward the jail, cursing, confused, angry. Horses were saddled in a panic. A posse formed in the messy way. Posses often formed fast, emotional, driven by embarrassment and fear. Because the town understood what had happened. Doolin had done the impossible again. He had escaped, but the escape did not end at the jail door. That was only the first step. Doolin and a few others needed transportation, and they needed it now. Foot travel would leave tracks. A slow pace would allow deputies to close in, so they took what they needed. Somewhere in the night, they stopped a buggy on the road. Ordinary people trying to get home, caught in the wrong moment. The escapees forced them aside, took control, and pushed on. Wheels rattled over rough ground. Horses snorted and pulled hard. The night air whipped against faces. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew. Hoofbeats, shouted commands, the distant echo of the town's anger. Doolin did not look back with pride. He looked back with calculation. He was not thinking about being a legend. He was thinking about distance, timing, and survival. The territory was big, but it was also connected by telegraph lines and roads. If the posse reached the next town first, the escape would end in minutes. If deputies cut them off at a river crossing, the escape would end in gunfire. So Doolin chose routes he believed would buy him time. He pushed toward open country, toward places where a man could disappear. He aimed for distance, because distance was safety. By morning, the story would spread. Newspapers would shout it, lawmen would swear, rewards would rise. The chase would become bigger than one town, and somewhere in that growing storm, Doolin rode with the same hard truth he had carried for years. He could not go back. Not to the jail. Not to normal life. Not to peace. He had forced the world to see him as an outlaw. And now the world would not allow him to be anything else. For the law, the escape was humiliation. For the deputies hunting him, it became personal. For Bill Doolin, it was another borrowed breath. But borrowed breaths run out, and the men who would end him were already moving, already planning, already learning his habits. After the Guthrie jailbreak, Bill Doolin does not celebrate for long. A man can escape iron bars, but he cannot escape what comes next. The territory is full of riders, and the law is no longer chasing. Aruma, the law is chasing a man who embarrassed him in front of everyone. Every sheriff wants credit. Every deputy wants the reward. And every marshal wants one thing most of all: the end of the story. Bill Doolin becomes a moving target with a shrinking map. He rides through the rough places, the places where the grass grows tall and the roads fade into nothing. He sleeps in hidden spots. He eats when he can. He trusts fewer people each week. He knows that one careless visit to the wrong house, one word spoken to the wrong friend, can place him on a trail that leads straight to a gun. But Doolin is not only thinking like an outlaw, he is thinking like a husband and a father. 2. That is the weakness the law waits for, because a man can live as a ghost for a long time if he has no heart pulling him back. But when a man has family, he becomes human again. And humans do not disappear forever. They return, they check in, they try to see their loved ones, even if it is risky. Doolin tries to keep distance, but distance has a cost. The longer he stays away, the more he feels like he is losing the only normal piece of his life. The outlaw life is loud and cold. Family is quiet and warm. A person who has tasted warmth does not forget it, so he takes chances. Small at first, then larger. Meanwhile, the men hunting him grow more patient. They stop rushing into every rumor. They stop chasing every false track. They begin to think like Doolin thinks: cold, quiet, and careful. Among them is a deputy U.S. Marshal named Heck Thomas. Thomas is not famous for mercy. He is famous for finishing what he starts. He knows outlaws lie. He knows they hide behind friends. He knows they get sloppy when they feel safe. And Thomas believes Doolin will feel safe only in one place, near his own people, so the law waits where the outlaw's heart might lead him. By late August of 1896, the air in the territory feels heavy. Summer heat hangs over the land. Roads are dusty. Trees stand still, like they are listening. Doolin is moving, and he does not know how close the end is. He has escaped so many times that survival has become a habit. He has trained himself to believe there will always be another route, another hideout, another trick. That belief is dangerous, because it starts to feel like truth. Then comes a night near Lhasa. The road is dark. The country is quiet. There are no cheering crowds now, no saloon laughter, no bold talk. This is not a robbery. This is not a show. This is a hunt. Heck Thomas and his men choose their position carefully. They do not stand in open view. They do not shout too soon. They place themselves the way wolves place themselves, where the prey must pass. When Doolin rides into the area, the law steps out. A voice calls for him to surrender. For a brief moment, the world holds still. This is the moment where a man might choose life over pride. But Bill Doolin has lived too long by one rule: never give the law a clean ending. He turns and fires. The gunshots split the night. One sound, then another, then several, quick and sharp. Doolin fights because fighting is what has kept him alive. He has survived by refusing to freeze. The deputies answer with their own fire, and this time there is no open prairie wide enough to swallow him. There is no crowd to slow the pursuers. There is no confusion to hide in. There is only distance measured in feet. A shotgun booms, heavy and final. Buckshot hits hard, not like a single bullet, but like a brutal handful of iron, thrown at a man's chest. The force stops him. His body falters. The fight leaves his hands. Bill Doolin drops to the ground, and the chase ends the way. So many frontier chases ended, not in a courtroom, not in a prison cell, but in the dirt, under the open sky. When the shooting stops, the law steps closer. They confirm what they already know. Bill Doolin is dead. There is no victory speech, no grand celebration in that moment. There is only the strange quiet that follows violence. Men breathe hard. Horses shift their weight. The night wind moves again. Soon, the news travels, just like it always does. Some people feel relief, some feel shock, some feel disappointment, as if a story they were following has been canceled. That is another strange truth about the Wild West. Outlaws frightened people, but they also fascinated them. They became larger than life in the imagination of towns that were tired of ordinary days. People spoke their names like characters, even while they feared what those names meant. After Doolin's death, the story does not end quietly. His body is taken back, and crowds gather again. People want proof. They want to see the face of the outlaw who outran the law for so long. Photographs are taken. The legend is turned into an object, and the frontier does what it often did with tragedy. It sells it in the end. Bill Doolin is buried, and the ground closes over him like a final lock. Then time keeps moving. The territory continues to grow. Towns become cities. Railroads connect places that once felt unreachable. Law becomes stronger. The Wild West begins to fade, not in one dramatic moment, but in a slow change. More order, fewer gaps. Less space for men like Doolin to live, and that is the real ending of Bill. Doolin's life. Not only that he died, but that his kind of life was becoming impossible. So what is his legacy? Some will say he was nothing more than a violent outlaw, a man who stole, threatened, and killed. A man who chose the gun over the law. Others will say he was a product of his time, shaped by a frontier where justice was often distant and survival was often harsh. The truth is simple, even if it is uncomfortable. Bill Doolin made choices. Some choices were made from fear, some from pride, some from desperation, some from a desire to control a life that felt out of control, and every choice led him closer to Lawson. In the end, his story becomes a warning as much as it becomes a legend. A man can run for years, but he cannot run forever, because the West always collects what is owed. If the viewer wants more true, real-life Wild West biographies told in simple, story-driven episodes, they should subscribe and stay with the series. And they should comment one thing. Was Bill Doolin a cold-blooded villain, or a man who lost his way on a violent frontier?